Okay, we're going to have a look at some of the stories now that are making headlines around the world, and we're starting with the Financial Times Deutschland, which is reporting that China has taken over the US to become the world's biggest energy user.
In the Business Day, the South African newspaper is reporting on a warning from the OECD that the strengthening South African rand will hurt exports there. And the picture story you can see there is of South African President Jacob Zuma meeting with Colonel Gaddafi.
And on the front page of the International Herald Tribune, the medicinal gel that we've just been talking about that's been tested in South Africa and is offering women a great deal of protection from the AIDS virus. They also report on the strongest evidence yet of a strengthening recovery in the commercial aviation sector. That, of course, is your main story today, Sal, isn't it? From Farnborough, that the world's two largest plane makers announcing more than $24 billion worth of new jet orders. And the photo is of international aid for Afghanistan, a pure mountain of it there, that Afghans are seeking to get greater control of the billions of dollars worth of development funds coming into the country.
Let's look at what the Financial Times is discussing today. You see a big picture there of David Cameron. Well, it's reporting on President Barack Obama raising the issue of BP's alleged role in lobbying for the release of Libyan terrorist Abdel Basit al-Megrahi when he meets with British Prime Minister David Cameron today.
Spain's El País is reporting on a very tense situation indeed between air traffic controllers and the Public Works Ministry in Barcelona. 33 controllers out of 61 have called in sick, causing delays in several Spanish airports over the weekend, and they're calling this a covert strike.
Now, take a look at this one. This is the Moscow Times. I don't know if you can see it clearly there, but this is the eternal optimist, it would seem, a fur hat seller in Moscow in his shorts and slops. Basically, it's one of the hottest summers on record in Moscow, and he's determined to sell those winter hats.
I think they're rather nice. Well, let's go quickly now to Kabul and take a look at the live scene there. That is the conference hall where, of course, international foreign ministers from around 70 countries or so are meeting. They're going to be discussing this critical point in the position for Afghanistan. Hamid Karzai, the president, is due to open the conference in a little while. Of course, here at BBC World News, we'll be giving you full coverage of this conference as it gets underway. But in the meantime, let's have a look a bit more closely at those newspapers. And Bundeep Singh Rangar of IndusView is here with us. Thank you very much indeed for coming in this morning.
Welcome.
Starting with the Financial Times Deutschland, it seems as though whenever we mention China these days, it's always involving hyperbole, isn't it? Biggest, best, longest, shortest.
Overtaking.
I guess that's a sign of the times, right? This is the world's fastest growing economy, heading to be the #1 position in the global economy. So here's yet another yardstick of where they're going. They exceed the US for the largest amount of energy consumption, just by a tad. But certainly that's one big, I guess, sea change in the world energy consumption.
Not a surprising scene change though at all, though, wouldn't you say, given the sheer amount of building and infrastructure projects and everything else that's going on there, and the number of people that live there, all of which consume energy.
Absolutely, Sally. That's a good point. And I guess if you break down the numbers, while the overall energy consumption has surpassed the US, oil is still half of the US. So oil consumption is half. Coal, on the other hand, is 3 times that of the US.
And now, is that because in China, nowhere near the number of people have a car and are driving about, do you think?
Well, that's one reason.
Partly to do with it.
And also, coal is just cheaper and less sensitive politically than oil is, and manufacturing often uses electricity fueled by coal. The big difference, of course, is that as China gets more urbanized and it gets more into automobiles, as you mentioned, it is no longer just a supplier to the rest of the world, it is a demand creator. So if tomorrow China decides to switch very aggressively to hybrid cars and use alternative energy, it'll set the pace of change for the rest of the world, not just be reacting to the West. And that's a big, big underlying theme here.
And moving on now to the South African Business Day newspaper, reporting on an OECD warning of the risks of having a stronger currency.
Yeah, interesting, because South Africa is running at 25% unemployment. And if you look at, we talk about the BRIC countries, this is Africa's largest representative, right? This is the largest economy there. And they're running at about 3.3% GDP growth, while inflation is 2 points above it at 5.3. So this really is a sign that's saying, look, if you guys want to fix things and create job growth domestically, don't make it expensive for yourself. Make it cheaper, export more, and generate growth, stimulate growth, not the other way around.
So you're saying it makes sense, the OECD idea, to control their currency if they can?
I mean, look at China as a great example, right? I mean, they've had a very successful export-led growth by controlling their currency and certainly keeping it, some may argue, artificially devalued.
And you can hardly get away from matters Libyan these days. There, also in Business Day front page, you've got the Colonel Gaddafi greeting Jacob Zuma, the President of South Africa. Moving on now to the International Herald Tribune. Three main stories actually on the front page there. What is being greeted as a real breakthrough in terms of the fight against the spread of HIV and AIDS.
This could be a real one because they're actually now getting evidence to support that it might halve the incidence of AIDS. And if there is an ingredient, of course, in this gel, that could be massively implicating.
And also, Sally, your story, of course, coming out of Farnborough today.
Yeah, the massive jet orders coming through. I mean, it wasn't a surprise. There was expectations were high, but this is a bit of a boost, isn't it, for everybody, wouldn't you say?
Well, this is like the Oscars of the airline industry, isn't it? You've got, the who's who there, and you've got the classic battle between, again,
Airbus and Boeing,
Coke and Pepsi in the aircraft industry. What's interesting is that we're now in the next big cycle anticipated of growth. And if you look at the orders, by the way, Airbus is twice that of Boeing right now. But all the orders are from the emerging markets. The biggest order from Emirates, the biggest order outside is from either Indonesia, Brazil, or some emerging market in Asia or the Middle East. And I guess that's really a pointer to where future next cycle of air traffic and passenger traffic is expected. Yeah, it's a big one, $24 billion, but I think Boeing's going to catch up on this one.
Now, it's going to be very interesting, isn't it, to watch this meeting between Barack Obama and David Cameron. Obviously, a lot on the agenda, and probably the thorniest issue, the BP Libya controversy.
Yeah, BP, big problem, who knows? Look, it's a politically sensitive matter, but certainly with Cameron visiting there, he's, I think, going to be asked a lot of questions, and BP's at the top of the agenda for a lot of people, a lot of anger certainly directed. And behind the scenes, clearly there's some maneuvering that's going on to help smoothen things out a little bit. Politically sensitive, I think Cameron's doing the right thing just to stay a bit clear of it and not entering into discussion. Won't help him politically, will it?
Bundeep Singh Rangar, Chairman of IndusView, thank you very much indeed for going through the papers with us today. And very quickly, let's just have a little glimpse then at the live shot of the conference taking place in Kabul today. As you can see, delegates are assembling. It's due to start pretty shortly. We're expecting President Karzai to kick off events in just a little while. From Sally and from me, it's goodbye.
Bye-bye.